Once upon a time, in a quiet Nigerian village, a young boy named Elijah lived with a widow named Priscilla. Elijah was an orphan adopted by a widow, Priscilla. Her husband had passed away long ago, so she raised the boy alone with no one to help. She trained Elijah with all the love a mother could give, but they didn't have much. Priscilla managed to sponsor Elijah up to primary 6, but after that, his schooling had to stop. There was no money and no husband to support them. To survive, Priscilla taught Elijah how to hawk sachet water and bottled drinks on the street. She also hawked food to make ends meet. They worked under the hot sun, morning till night, just to feed themselves. Nobody ever came to help. One day, Elijah didn't return home. He had been kidnapped, taken by strangers. These men were not normal criminals. They were body harvesters. They kept Elijah in a lonely, dark room for weeks, feeding him just enough to keep him alive. Then one day, a buyer came. Back in the village, Priscilla cried bitterly. Her only son was gone. She searched every corner of the city, but Elijah had vanished like smoke. Elijah was sold to a rich billionaire. Nobody knew where the man got his money, not even his wife or children. His name was Chief Honorable Bright. But Bright was not an ordinary man. He was a ritualist. Elijah was used as a sacrifice for wealth. His body was buried underneath an altar inside Bright's private mansion. Elijah's blood sealed the covenant. His spirit became an oracle, a tool, a god for Bright's evil rituals. But Elijah's spirit never found peace. Years later, Chief Bright was caught. His crimes were exposed. Human trafficking, rituals, murder. The court found him guilty. His house was demolished by the government. What they didn't know was that Elijah's body was still buried there, under the altar. 8 years passed. A new man, a millionaire named Mr. John, bought the land. He converted it into a real estate property. Modern houses, shining floors, painted walls. Nobody told him what happened on that land before. Soon, tenants started moving in. One of those tenants was the Anderson family. Narration shifts to present day, slower, more cinematic tone. David Anderson was a humble man. He had a small business in town. His wife, Clara, was a teacher. They had 2 children, Emma, aged 10, and Jake, 6. They had been searching for a better place to live. Somewhere quiet, somewhere peaceful. When they saw the new apartment, it felt like a miracle. It had 3 bedrooms, constant electricity, clean running water, and the rent was surprisingly affordable. They didn't ask why. They just packed their bags and moved in. On the day they arrived, the sun was shining. Birds were singing. A cool breeze brushed through the compound. Everything felt fresh and new. While David carried boxes into the apartment, a woman approached him. She was in her early 50s, wearing a plain wrapper and headscarf. "Good afternoon," she said politely. "Good afternoon, Ma," David replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. She gave a nervous smile. "I'm Mrs. Peterson. I stay next door," David smiled back. "Nice to meet you, Ma." Then she looked at him closely and asked, "Sir, why did you choose to rent this house?" David chuckled. "Because the rent is good and the light doesn't go off. We've been looking for something like this for years." Mrs. Peterson nodded slowly, but her eyes looked sad. "I see. I'm actually planning to move out," she said quietly. David frowned. "Why? This place looks okay." She paused, then whispered, "It's not safe at night." Before he could ask her to explain, she walked away quickly. David watched her go. A strange chill ran down his spine, but he shook it off. Maybe she was just being dramatic. That evening, the Anderson family sat in their living room. They prayed, ate rice and stew, and laughed at old family jokes. The kids ran around the sitting room excitedly, exploring their new home. It felt good, too good. By 9 p.m, they had all gone to bed. Emma and Jake shared the second room, while David and Clara took the master bedroom. The house was silent, too silent. Then it began. At exactly 2 a.m, the air in the house changed. Soft whispers floated through the corridors, like wind, but not wind. Voices, arguing voices. David opened his eyes. He sat up slowly, confused. "Who's making noise at this hour?" he mumbled. Clara turned, half asleep. "Did you hear that?" David nodded. "I'll check it out. Stay here." He slipped on his slippers and walked slowly to the front door. The corridor light flickered like it was struggling. The voices grew louder, but when David opened the door, no one was there. Only shadows, long stretched shadows dancing across the walls. He stared, frozen. His heart began to race. He slammed the door shut and locked it. "What did you see?" Clara asked as he walked back in, pale and shaky. David hesitated. Shadows, but nobody was there. Then a knock, a slow, heavy knock on the front door. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the house. Clara gasped. David stood still. The knock stopped just as suddenly as it had begun. Clara gripped David's arm. "Don't open it." David nodded. "I won't." He looked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. He sat down slowly, but he couldn't shake the feeling. Something was watching them. They both tried to sleep again, but they couldn't. Then, at 3:15 a.m., new whispers began. This time, they came from the walls. Clara sat up quickly. "David? You're hearing that, right?" David was already awake. He nodded. He stood and pressed his ear against the wall. The whispers were faster now. Urgent. Angry. Then one word came out clearly. "Leave. Now." David jumped back. "What did it say?" Clara asked. David turned to her, breathing hard. "It said we should leave." Suddenly a loud cry tore through the apartment. It came from the children's room. Emma. Clara and David rushed to the door. They flung it open. Emma was sitting up in bed, shaking and crying. Jake was still asleep beside her. "What happened, baby?" Clara asked, hugging her. Emma sobbed. "There was a boy. He was under my bed. His eyes were red. He said, 'Don't stay here.' They buried me." David and Clara stared at each other, speechless. The air in the room felt cold. Ice cold. David checked under the bed. Nothing. Clara hugged Emma tightly and whispered, "It's okay, it was just a dream." But deep down, she knew it wasn't. And outside, in the darkness of the compound, something or someone was watching. The night was long. After Emma's terrifying experience, the Anderson family couldn't sleep. David sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank wall. Clara was holding Emma, rocking her gently, whispering, "You're safe, my love. It's just a dream." But even as she said those words, her hands were shaking. Jake, the younger child, was still fast asleep, unaware of the strange things happening around him. David stood up. He had made a decision. "I will talk to the caretaker tomorrow," he said firmly. "We need to know what's really going on here." Clara nodded. "Good, because something is not right." David turned to his daughter. "Emma, are you sure about what you saw?" The girl's eyes were wide and afraid. She didn't blink. She just nodded slowly and said, "He said they buried him here. His name is Elijah." That name, it echoed in David's ears. "Elijah?" Clara looked at David. "Did you hear that?" "I did," he said. "We'll find out more tomorrow. Let's all just stay in our room till morning." They slept with the lights on, but sleep did not come easily. Morning came with silence. Not the normal peaceful kind, but the kind that felt like the house was holding its breath. David didn't go to work. He needed answers. By 10 a.m., he stepped out of the house and went straight to the caretaker's small office near the gate. The caretaker, a man in his early 40s, was sitting under a big mango tree reading the newspaper. "Good morning," David greeted. "Morning, sir." "Hope no problem," the man responded with a smile. David didn't waste time. "Sir, please, what was on this land before they built these apartments?" The caretaker froze for a moment. Then he smiled nervously. Just an empty land. Oh, government sold it. Our ogre built these fine houses." David folded his arms. "Was there ever a house here before?" The caretaker paused, then scratched his head. Well, I think so, sir. But that one was demolished long ago. Something about illegal building or something like that." "Why?" David looked straight into his eyes. "My daughter said she saw a boy named Elijah, and he told her something was buried here." The caretaker's face changed. His smile disappeared. He looked around, like he didn't want anyone to hear what he was about to say. He leaned closer. "Sir, don't tell anyone I said this, but I've heard that name before." David's heart skipped. The man continued. "They say years ago, the man that owned this land was arrested. He was rich, very rich. But people say he used juju. He sacrificed children." David's mouth went dry. "Do you know if anyone was buried here?" he asked quietly. The caretaker looked down. I don't know, but some workers said they found something strange when digging the foundation. Bones. Small bones. But our ogre told them to keep quiet." David stepped back slowly. His mind was spinning. He thanked the caretaker and walked back to the apartment like a man carrying heavy news. Clara was sitting in the living room when he returned. He didn't even need to speak. She saw the look on his face and asked, "What did you find out?" David sat down beside her. "There was a house here before. The man who owned it used juju. The caretaker said they found bones during construction." Clara covered her mouth. "Jesus?" "I think Elijah was real," David said. Suddenly a loud bang came from the corridor. They both jumped. It sounded like a door had slammed shut. David rushed to check. The children's door was wide open. Emma was sitting on the bed again, staring at the same wall. Clara ran to her. "Emma, what are you doing?" Emma pointed at the wall. "He's back." Clara's body went cold. David slowly stepped into the room. "What did he say?" Emma whispered. "He said he wants justice. He said he doesn't like the people living here. He wants peace." David bent down beside her. "Did he say what he wants us to do?" Emma looked at both of them and said quietly, "He said, dig." That afternoon, David called a trusted friend who worked in local real estate. He explained everything. The friend was silent for a while, then finally said, "David, get your family out of that house. You shouldn't stay there." "But I need proof," David replied. "I want to know the truth." "You won't like the truth," the man said. That night they stayed together in one room again, but this time they left a Bible open beside the bed and prayed for hours. Then midnight came, and with it the whispers. Only this time they were louder and closer. The lights in the house flickered. The air turned cold. Then the television turned on by itself. Static. White noise filled the room. Then a face appeared. It was a boy. Eyes wide, face pale, lips not moving, but the voice was loud. "You live on cursed ground." David reached for the remote, but the TV turned off by itself. Then a loud sound echoed through the hallway. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Slow. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. Like someone walking in chains. Clara held her children close. David picked up his phone and turned on the flashlight. He stepped into the hallway. No one. But then he looked down. Wet footprints, child-sized, leading to the kitchen. David followed them. They disappeared at the kitchen door. He opened it slowly. Nothing. Then suddenly a slam. The kitchen cupboard burst open and a single word whispered from behind him. "Elijah." David turned fast. No one was there. In the living room, Clara was praying out loud, "Lord, protect us. Let your angels guard this home." The children were crying. The house was alive with noise, knocks, whispers, footsteps, then silence. Everything stopped at once. The lights came back. The air felt normal again, but no one could sleep. At 3:45 a.m., David sat at the dining table with a pen and paper. He began to write, "Tomorrow I'm going to dig. I don't care what I find. If Elijah's spirit needs rest, I will give it to him." And outside, a shadow watched from the window, smiling. Previously on Elijah's Curse, David Anderson and his family had just moved into what seemed like the perfect apartment, but behind the beautiful paint and smooth tiles, something dark was buried. Their daughter Emma saw the ghost of a boy named Elijah. The house whispered at night, shadows moved on their own, and then the name Elijah kept returning. David discovered a terrible past about a billionaire named Chief Honorable Bright, who used a child for money rituals and buried his body under an altar right where the Andersons now live. Now that boy's spirit wants justice.
Suspenseful, calm, everyone!
The air in the compound felt strange that morning. Quiet. Too quiet. David didn't go to work. He couldn't. He had one mission: to dig. Not because he believed in ghosts, but because the name Elijah kept disturbing his family, and if digging would stop it, so be it. He went to the caretaker again. This time, he didn't ask politely. "Well, where exactly was the old altar before they demolished the mansion?" David demanded. The caretaker looked frightened. He tried to speak, but no words came. David stepped closer. "Please, my children are no longer sleeping well. We hear voices. I saw footprints. I need to know." The caretaker took a deep breath and pointed toward a corner of the compound near the last block. "There. That's where the old altar used to be, but please don't tell anybody I told you." David nodded. "Thank you." He returned to his apartment, picked a shovel from his store, and walked straight to the spot. Clara rushed out after him. "David, are you really going to dig?" "Yes," he said. "If this boy is crying for justice, we must do something. We can't just pray and sleep. That boy wants to be seen." Clara was scared, but she understood. Emma watched from the window. Her little hand touched the glass and she whispered, "He's happy you're listening." David began digging. The ground was strong. Hot sun beat down on him. Sweat dripped into his eyes. Hour after hour passed. The neighbours watched from their balconies, whispering. Some thought he was mad. Others just stared in silence. Then around 1:30 p.m, the shovel hit something hard.
Clank!
David dropped to his knees and cleared the sand with his hands. It was wood. An old wooden box covered in red symbols and wrapped with black rope. Clara gasped. "Jesus, what is that?" David tried to lift it. It was light, but when he touched the rope, his hand burned slightly. He pulled back. "It's hot," he said, like fire. Just then, a strong breeze blew through the compound. Dry leaves flew up in circles. Even though the sun was out, the sky darkened slightly. The air became heavier. Then a voice, soft but clear. "Thank you." David stepped back. Clara grabbed his hand. "Did you hear that?" He nodded. They both turned toward Emma's window. She was smiling gently. "He said you found him," she said, "but he's not free yet." That night, the box was kept in the living room. Nobody slept. David didn't even blink. The children stayed in Clara's arms on the couch and the lights were on. Around 2:11 a.m, the TV turned on again. This time, no static. It showed a black and white picture of an old house. Then a boy's voice said he buried others too. David froze. "What do you mean?" The TV went off, then turned back on. Now the image showed Elijah, face pale, eyes red, tears rolling down his cheeks. He opened his mouth. "Dig deeper." Then the screen went black. The lights went out, all of them. Darkness swallowed the room. Emma screamed. "He's here." David grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. The moment the light came on, the box in the living room shook. A loud knock echoed on their wall. Boom! Then another. Boom! Then silence. Then whispering. This time the whispers were different. Angry, not Elijah's voice. A man's voice. "Leave the boy alone! He belongs to me!" David stood frozen. "Who's that?" No response. Only a dark shadow crawled slowly across the ceiling like smoke. It shaped into a figure, tall and horned with red glowing eyes. Clara screamed. She grabbed her Bible and began to shout, "Blood of Jesus! Holy Ghost fire!" David threw the Bible at the shadow. It hissed loudly and disappeared. Then silence. Emma began to cry again. "Daddy, that was the man who killed Elijah. He said, he's coming for you." The next morning, David called a local pastor, a trusted one. Pastor Tim. He explained everything. The pastor didn't laugh. He didn't call David crazy. He simply said, "That child's blood is crying. You are now part of his journey. You must help him rest." David asked, "But how? I found the box." Pastor Tim said quietly, "The box holds part of his soul, but the rest is still trapped beneath the compound. There's more down there. Bones, spirits, evil altars." David asked, "So what do I do?" The pastor said, "Prepare. Tomorrow night I will come for prayers. We'll dig again and we'll break the curse." That night the apartment was calmer. No TV turning on, no knocking, just silence. But Emma had a dream. In it, she was standing inside the old mansion. Dark walls, red curtains, candles everywhere. A boy stood in front of her, Elijah. He held her hand. "You're the first person that saw me," he said. Emma looked up at him. "Are you angry?" He shook his head. "No, I'm tired." She asked, "What do you want?" He said, "Justice and peace." Then he pointed behind her. She turned and saw a tall man in black robes walking toward them. "Elijah, run!" Elijah held her tighter. "No, that's him. That's the one who killed me." Then Emma woke up, screaming. Morning came, the final day. Pastor Tim arrived by 6 p.m. He came with holy oil, salt, anointing water, and 5 men of prayer. They went to the spot where David dug the box and began to pray. As they prayed, the wind grew stronger. The ground trembled lightly. Then the pastor shouted, "Begin to dig." They dug deep, very deep. And at about 9 p.m. they found more. Another box, this one larger. Wood, rope, bones, small skulls, children. Even Pastor Tim trembled. These were victims. Then a voice cried out, loud, sharp, painful, "Free us!" The ground shook. The apartment lights burst. One of the men fell and began to shake like he was possessed. Pastor Tim and the others surrounded him and prayed hard. Finally, the spirit left him and screamed into the night. The box shook and cracked open on its own. White smoke floated out of it and vanished into the air. Elijah had been freed, but the pastor turned to David with sad eyes. "It's not over." David asked, "Why?" The pastor said, "There is still one more soul." That night, after the digging, after the screams and smoke had faded, the Anderson family sat quietly in their living room. Clara held Jake and Emma in her arms. David stared at the cracked floor, and where the final box had been found. The apartment no longer felt like a home, it felt like a graveyard. Pastor Tim sat beside him. "You've done a great thing," he said. David looked up. "But you said it's not over." The pastor nodded slowly. "Elijah is free, but his mother, the one who raised him, she still cries, and she doesn't even know why." David closed his eyes. That name again, Priscilla, the widow who loved Elijah like her own blood, the woman who searched everywhere, but never found her child. She still lived in the village, alone, waiting for answers. Scene changes. Next morning, calm music, soft tone. David couldn't rest. He couldn't just move on. So he called someone, a woman named Cynthia. She worked with an NGO that helped widows and missing persons. "Cynthia," he said, "I need to find a woman. Her name is Priscilla. She lived in a village called Eziama." Cynthia paused. "I know someone from there. Give me 2 days." David waited. He didn't tell Clara. He didn't tell the children. He just waited. Then the call came. "David, we found her." Scene changes. Village background, emotional piano playing.
Yeah.
Priscilla was older now, wrinkles on her face. Her eyes had cried too much over the years. But when she heard someone wanted to speak about Elijah, her heart jumped. Cynthia arranged a trip. 2 days later, Priscilla arrived in the city, her first time leaving the village in years. She came with nothing but a handbag and an old photo of Elijah, taken when he was in primary school, holding sachet water. David waited for her outside the apartment gate. When their eyes met, she stopped walking. "You called me?" she asked softly. David nodded. "Yes, Ma. Please, come inside." Scene inside the house, quiet, soft sobbing. David sat across from her. Clara brought her water. Emma stayed beside her mom, holding Jake's hand. David cleared his throat.
Ma!
"I'm sorry this took so long." Priscilla looked at him with tired eyes. David placed the picture of Elijah's altar, the box, and the bones on the table. He began to speak, slowly, carefully. He told her everything. How Elijah had been taken, how he was buried beneath a billionaire's altar, how he cried for years, and how he finally found peace. Tears rolled down her cheeks, her hands shook. She whispered, "My Elijah, my son, he died crying?" David couldn't answer. He just held her hand. "I'm sorry," he said. Priscilla looked around the apartment. "This is where he was buried?" David nodded. She stood and walked to the center of the room. She knelt down and placed her palm on the floor. "Elijah, Mama is here." Then she broke down in tears, the kind of tears that had waited 8 years to fall. Scene fades to evening, red sunset lighting the sky. David sat outside the compound with Priscilla. The air was fresh, peaceful. For the first time in days, no whispers, no shadows, just calm. Then David stood up and faced her. This house, this entire compound, I bought it when it was finished, but now I know it was never really mine. Priscilla frowned. I don't understand. David smiled gently. This land belonged to Pain, to your son. He was the reason I came here. He was the reason my family found the truth. He reached into his pocket and brought out a key. This house, it's yours now. Priscilla gasped. Me? David nodded. I'm giving it to you as a gift to honor Elijah. He deserves that respect. She covered her mouth. Tears returned. No one has ever done something like this for me, she whispered. David said softly, it's not just for you. It's for the boy who sold water, who was never seen, who became a god, and who finally found peace. Final scene, 1 week later. Priscilla stood in front of the house gate, wearing a simple wrapper. She opened the gate and stepped inside. The compound was clean, quiet, peaceful. She looked at the sky and whispered, Elijah, we're home. And for the first time in 8 years, a soft wind blew past her cheek, like a kiss, like a whisper, like a goodbye. The end. Thank you for watching Elijah's Curse. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. A story of pain, of truth, and of final peace.